There are two kinds of encounters in this world, the ones we forget and the ones that change everything we are. Our story begins on a stormy night in Chicago, when Dr. Ethan Carter was about to wrap up another exhausting shift in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. Known as much for his skilled hands in medicine as for his fickle heart in relationships, Ethan cultivated his reputation as a player doctor, almost like a shield. 3 years without a relationship lasting more than a few weeks was a record he flaunted with a superficial smile, while internally wondering if he'd ever feel something genuine for anyone. That night, when the nurse called him for one last patient, he had no idea his life was about to change. On the emergency stretcher was Sister Grace Sullivan, a 28-year-old novice experiencing mysterious weakness in her legs and tingling in her extremities. What started as a routine physical exam transformed into the first of many surprises when, while testing her reflexes, Ethan noticed something alarming. "I'm not getting any ankle reflexes," he said, concern evident in his voice. "How long have you been feeling this weakness?" "It started 3 days ago," Grace replied with a serenity that contrasted with the seriousness of her symptoms. "I thought it was just fatigue from working at the orphanage." It was during that first consultation that the unexpected happened. While filling out her medical history, they discovered a connection neither could have predicted. Ethan's spiritual mentor, during his brief consideration of the seminary in his youth, was the same priest who had guided Grace in her vocation. "You almost became a priest?" asked Grace, genuinely surprised, as Ethan prepared the paperwork for her immediate admission. "And you were a professional pianist before the convent?" he replied, equally intrigued. "Seems like we both traded one path for another." What Ethan didn't reveal at that moment was how abandoning religious life still haunted him, a decision his doctor father never fully accepted. Instead, he focused on the diagnosis, increasingly convinced that Grace was showing the classic signs of Guillain-Barré syndrome. As he admitted her to the hospital, ordering an urgent lumbar puncture to confirm his suspicions, Ethan didn't notice the curious glances from the staff, who had never seen him so personally involved with a case. Nor did he notice how, for the first time in years, he didn't check his phone for messages from his romantic conquests during the entire consultation. What he couldn't ignore, however, was the strange feeling of familiarity while talking with Grace, as if he'd known that soul for a long time. An inexplicable connection that troubled him more than he cared to admit. As he left her hospital room that night, with the first doses of immunoglobulin already flowing into Grace's veins, Ethan did something unusual. He promised to personally return to check on her before his next shift began. What he didn't know was that this promise would be just the first of many that would test his professional, ethical, and emotional boundaries in the weeks to come. The diagnosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome was confirmed the next morning when the lumbar puncture results showed elevated protein levels in Grace's cerebrospinal fluid. What should have been a routine case for Ethan quickly turned into a professional obsession as her condition worsened faster than expected. In just 72 hours, the weakness that had started in Grace's legs had climbed to her arms. Her fingers, which once danced masterfully across piano keys in international concert halls, could now barely press the nurse call button. The immunoglobulin treatment wasn't enough to halt the relentless advance of the disease. "I think we should consider adding plasmapheresis to your treatment," Ethan suggested during his third consecutive visit to Grace's room, well after his shift had ended. "It seems like you rarely go home, Dr. Carter," Grace observed, her voice already showing signs of weakness, a worrying indication that the paralysis might soon affect her respiratory muscles. It was that night, while personally monitoring Grace's response to therapy, that the walls began to fall between doctor and patient. Perhaps it was Grace's vulnerability, or maybe the darkness of the room illuminated only by medical monitors, but confessions began to flow like a dammed river, finally finding a path. I was driving the car when my sister died, Grace revealed, her voice almost a whisper. We were running away, actually. I had just canceled a European concert tour because I couldn't stand that life anymore. The fake glamour, the constant loneliness. Her words came in fragments, not from the disease, but from emotion. My sister was helping me escape from my manager, from my contract, when a truck appeared around the bend. I survived. She didn't. The silence that followed was filled only by the constant beeping of the monitors. Ethan, who always maintained a calculated professional distance from his patients, found himself sitting on the edge of Grace's bed, holding her weakened hand. "Is that why you entered the convent? To redeem yourself?" he finally asked. "I searched for answers everywhere," she replied. "I only found peace in the silence of the chapel. And you, doctor? What are you searching for?" The question hit Ethan like an unexpected diagnosis. Nobody had questioned his choices this way in years. "Control, maybe," he answered, surprised by his own honesty. "When I left the seminary, my father told me I was wasting my life. So I became the kind of doctor he wanted me to be, but I built my personal life in a way he would completely disapprove of." Ethan shared how each brief and superficial relationship was a form of protection. Nobody got close enough to really know him or disappoint him. The control was in always being the one who left first. That night marked a fundamental change. When Grace's monitor alarms sounded at 3 a.m., indicating her respiratory capacity had dropped to dangerous levels, Ethan didn't call the resident on duty. It was he who explained the need for intubation, he who held her hand as she was sedated, and he who remained by her side long after the procedure ended, watching the mechanical movement of her chest as the ventilator did the work her muscles could no longer perform. Dr. Walker, the department head, found Ethan asleep in the chair next to Grace's bed the following morning. "Carter, we need to talk about your involvement in this case," Walker said, his expression a mixture of concern and disapproval. Ethan knew he was crossing professional lines, but for the first time in his career, he didn't care about the consequences. Something more important was at stake, something he still couldn't name, but felt growing inside him every time he looked at Grace, silently fighting for her life. Grace's 5th day of intubation brought a new dimension of fear for Ethan. Patients with Guillain-Barré usually started showing signs of recovery at this stage, but Grace seemed stuck in limbo, neither worsening nor improving. The plasmapheresis, which Ethan had vehemently advocated for against other specialists' opinions, was being performed daily, but the results were still uncertain. "You need to step away from this case, Ethan," Dr. Walker insisted during a tense meeting in the hallway. "You're too personally involved. This isn't just unethical, it's dangerous for the patient." "I'm the best doctor for her," Ethan replied, his voice firm despite the exhaustion from days without proper sleep. "Nobody knows this case like I do." What Ethan didn't say was that nobody knew Grace like he did now. During the days she remained unconscious, he had read her journal at her request, a trust she placed in him minutes before intubation. In those pages, he found not only Grace's spiritual journey, but also her doubts, her fears, and, most disturbingly for him, her prayers asking for strength to ignore the feelings she was beginning to nurture for her doctor. It was during the 6th plasmapheresis session that the unthinkable happened. Grace's cardiac monitor began showing arrhythmias, which quickly evolved into ventricular fibrillation. In seconds, her heart stopped. "Code blue in room 507, shouted the nurse, while Ethan had already started chest compressions. The next 4 minutes were the longest of Ethan's life. Each second without response was an eternity. Each unsuccessful defibrillator discharge was a blow to his own soul. It wasn't just a patient fighting for her life under his hands. It was Grace, the woman who, against all odds and conventions, had penetrated the walls he'd built around his heart. "Come on, Grace," he whispered, while administering another dose of epinephrine. "Don't you dare leave me now." When the monitor finally showed the return of heartbeats, Ethan felt his own legs weaken. He leaned against the wall, trembling, as the team stabilized Grace. It was in this moment of absolute vulnerability that he admitted to himself a truth that would change everything. He was in love with a woman who had dedicated her life to God. 3 days later, Grace began showing signs of neurological recovery. Her eyes opened, immediately recognizing Ethan among the medical team. When the neurologist tested her reflexes, there was a weak but unmistakable response, the first real sign of improvement. As soon as it was possible to remove the endotracheal tube, and Grace could speak again, though with a hoarse voice, her first words surprised everyone. "I saw a light," she told Ethan when they finally were alone. "During those minutes when my heart stopped, there was no pain, just peace and absolute understanding." "Near-death experiences are common neurological phenomena," Ethan automatically responded, his scientific mind trying to rationalize. "It wasn't just a neurological phenomenon," Grace insisted, still weak but with conviction in her voice. "I received a message, Ethan, a confirmation that my place is in the convent." Those words hit Ethan like a terminal diagnosis. Just when he was finally ready to open his heart, to risk everything for a real feeling, Grace was reaffirming her dedication to religious life, inspired by an experience that he, as a doctor, couldn't accept as anything beyond brain chemistry during oxygen deprivation. "How can you be sure?" he asked, unable to hide the desperation in his voice. "How can you know it wasn't just your brain creating images?" "The same way I know what I feel for you," she answered, surprising him. "Some certainties come from the soul, not the mind." It was at this moment, with Grace still weakened but awake and lucid, that Ethan did something he never imagined doing in his professional life. He confessed his feelings for a patient. "I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "And that terrifies me, because in all my life, I've never wanted something I couldn't have." The silence that followed was filled with a world of possibilities and impossibilities, as both faced a choice that had no easy or painless answers. The following 3 weeks brought significant changes for both Grace and Ethan. While she gained strength daily through intensive physical therapy, first moving her fingers, then her hands, finally managing to sit up in bed without support, Ethan faced the consequences of his emotional involvement. The hospital's ethics investigation resulted in his temporary suspension from emergency care, though he could still supervise Grace's rehabilitation. His phone, previously constantly lit up with messages from potential dates, now remained silent. The nurses who once flirted with him now observed him with a mixture of fascination and compassion. The notorious Dr. Player had finally fallen in love with the one woman who was completely inaccessible. "Did you know I received an offer to head the neurology department in Boston?" Ethan revealed during a physical therapy session as Grace attempted her first steps, supported by parallel bars. "You should take it," Grace replied, the physical effort evident on her face, but determination even more visible. "It's an incredible opportunity." What remained unsaid was that distance might be the only solution for both of them. Grace's recovery had been marked by long conversations that deepened the connection between them even further, making the reality of their imminent separation even more painful. On the afternoon before Grace's transfer to a specialized rehabilitation center, the Mother Superior from the convent came to visit her. Ethan observed the meeting from a distance, noting how Grace seemed simultaneously comforted and disturbed by her spiritual mentor's presence. "She reminded me of my vows," Grace told him later, as Ethan helped her transfer to a wheelchair for one last stroll through the hospital gardens. "Not just the ones I've already taken, but the ones I'm about to take. Permanent vows, Ethan." The hospital garden was surprisingly empty that sunny afternoon, a final gift from the universe to them, a moment of privacy for a farewell that both knew was necessary, but neither desired. "Can you stand?" Ethan asked, parking the wheelchair near a bench. "With your help," she answered, extending her hands to him. Carefully, Ethan helped her stand. For a moment, their bodies were close, supporting each other. It was the first time they embraced, even if under the pretext of medical support. "I want to say this looking into your eyes, not from a wheelchair," Grace explained, her feet unsteady, but determined to remain firm for this moment. "You changed my life, Ethan Carter," she began, her words carefully chosen. "Before meeting you, I thought my vocation was an absolute certainty. Now I know that true faith doesn't exist without doubt. There is no devotion without choice." "I'm in love with you," Ethan responded simply, the words coming out with an honesty he had never allowed himself. "And that's never happened to me before? I didn't even know I was capable of feeling this." Grace smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "That's why I need to go back," she said. "Because if I stay with you now, I'll always wonder if I abandoned my vocation out of fear or convenience. I need to be sure, Ethan. And so do you." Ethan then understood what she was really saying. It wasn't a no, but it wasn't a yes either. It was a not yet, perhaps the most painful of the three. "Boston is only a 2-hour drive from the convent," he finally said, a small smile forming on his lips. "And they have an excellent neurology department that could monitor your recovery." "You accepted the job?" Grace asked, surprised. "Not yet," Ethan replied, "but I think I will. Someone recently taught me that sometimes we need to follow our path to discover where it really leads us." Grace touched Ethan's face gently, the first truly intimate touch between them. "I don't know if I can ever offer what you deserve," she said. "And I don't know if I'll ever be the man you deserve," he replied. "But maybe that's the beauty of it all. For the first time, I'm willing to wait to find out." As he helped her back into the wheelchair, something had changed between them. It wasn't a goodbye, but an acknowledgement that some encounters are so profound, they transform our souls, regardless of where our paths lead us afterward. As Ethan pushed Grace's wheelchair back to the hospital, the setting sun cast long shadows ahead of them. Two distinct silhouettes moving in separate directions, but somehow inextricably linked by something that transcended diagnoses, vows, and worldly conventions. A story that hadn't really ended, just turned a page. They say there are two kinds of encounters in this world, the ones we forget and the ones that change us forever. This was the story of how a doctor who no longer believed in anything and a nun who believed in everything found, through pain and healing, a truth neither expected. Sometimes love isn't about possession, but about growth. Not about being together, but about becoming who you truly are thanks to the other. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's the most sacred form of love there is.